We've all met them, the people who seem to think every conversation is their stage. They interrupt, talk over others, and make sure their voice is the loudest in the room. You start a sentence, and before you can finish, they've taken the spotlight and run with it. It's frustrating, it's exhausting, and it can leave you feeling invisible. But here's the truth: learning how to handle people who dominate conversations isn't about silencing them. It's about strengthening your own presence. Before you can handle people who dominate conversations, you must first understand why they behave that way. It's easy to label them as arrogant, rude, or self-centered, but often the truth runs deeper than that. People who constantly take over discussions aren't always driven by a desire to overpower others. Sometimes they're motivated by fear, insecurity, or an unfulfilled need for validation. Recognizing this distinction changes how you respond. It shifts you from reacting emotionally to responding with awareness and strategy. Let's start with the first group, the insecure talkers. These individuals talk excessively because silence makes them uncomfortable. In their mind, talking equals control. If they can keep the conversation going, they don't have to confront their own discomfort, anxiety, or feelings of inadequacy. They believe that by speaking more, they appear smarter, more interesting, or more valuable. Ironically, talking often achieves the opposite effect. It pushes people away, but they don't realize that. When you understand that their behavior is rooted in insecurity, you stop taking it personally. Instead of feeling offended, you begin to see their dominance as a mask for vulnerability. Then there are the unaware talkers. These people aren't malicious or manipulative. They simply lack social awareness. They don't notice when they interrupt others, speak too long, or shift every topic back to themselves. In their mind, they're being enthusiastic, not dominant. They're often so wrapped up in their own ideas that they forget conversations are supposed to be a two-way street. When dealing with them, it's less about confrontation and more about gentle redirection. A calm interjection like, "That's interesting. Can I add something to that?" helps guide the flow back toward balance without creating tension. Next, we have the power talkers, those who genuinely use words as a tool for control. These individuals often dominate conversations to assert authority or superiority. They enjoy being the center of attention, and their self-worth is tied to being perceived as the most knowledgeable or influential person in the room. They may interrupt, dismiss others' ideas, or use storytelling as a form of manipulation. Handling this type requires inner strength and composure. The more they sense you're intimidated, the more control they gain. But when you remain calm, confident, and unmoved, their power diminishes. Understanding the psychology behind these behaviors helps you respond strategically rather than emotionally. For example, when someone constantly talks over you, instead of thinking, "They're disrespecting me," you can shift your mindset to, "This person needs to be heard so badly that they can't even listen." That small mental shift changes your energy completely. You no longer feel angry or helpless. You feel centered. And when you're centered, you respond with intelligence instead of impulse. It's also important to understand that not all dominance in conversation is intentional. Sometimes people dominate because they feel unheard in other areas of life. Maybe they're ignored at work, undervalued at home, or surrounded by people who rarely listen. So when they finally get the chance to speak, they cling to it. In these moments, offering genuine presence, really listening for a moment, can actually diffuse their need to dominate. When people feel seen and acknowledged, they stop fighting for attention. However, understanding doesn't mean tolerating disrespect. You can have empathy without allowing someone to monopolize your time or silence your voice. The goal is to see clearly, not to excuse poor behavior. When you know where their behavior comes from, you can decide the best approach. Whether it's gentle redirection, setting boundaries, or disengaging completely, awareness gives you options. Reaction limits you, understanding empowers you. The truth is, conversations are more than just exchanges of words. They're energy dynamics. Every time someone dominates, they're trying to control that flow of energy. When you recognize their behavior for what it is, an attempt to fulfill an unmet emotional need, you stop feeding that control. You reclaim your space in the discussion simply by staying emotionally steady. Your calm presence becomes your quiet power. So the next time someone dominates a conversation, pause before reacting. Observe. Ask yourself, is this person seeking validation? Are they unaware of their behavior, or are they trying to assert control? Once you identify which it is, you'll know how to handle it. With patience for the insecure, guidance for the unaware, and boundaries for the power-driven, understanding the root of dominating behavior doesn't just make you better at handling others. It makes you better at understanding people in general. You begin to see beyond words and into motivations, and that insight transforms frustration into mastery, because the moment you understand that someone's dominance isn't about you, you take your power back, not by talking louder, but by standing stronger in silence and awareness. When someone dominates a conversation, your first instinct might be to push back, to raise your voice, talk faster, or fight for your turn to speak. It's a natural reaction because being interrupted or talked over feels disrespectful. But here's the truth. The moment you start competing for attention, you've already lost control of your power. You've entered their game, a game of ego, noise, and chaos. The real strength lies not in matching their volume, but in mastering your calm. Staying grounded is what separates reactive people from powerful communicators. Think about it. Dominant talkers thrive on energy. They feed off reactions. The more you get frustrated, the more they talk. The more you argue, the louder they become. It's like pouring fuel on a fire. But when you remain calm, composed, and steady, you starve the fire. You stop feeding their need for control. Your calmness disrupts their pattern. It confuses them because they're used to people either backing down or fighting back. When you do neither, you shift the energy of the entire interaction. Staying grounded starts with emotional self-awareness. Before you can handle others, you must understand your own triggers. Ask yourself, why do I feel the need to respond right now? Why does being interrupted make me so tense? Often, our frustration comes from feeling unseen or disrespected. But the truth is, your worth isn't defined by how much you talk. It's defined by how much control you have over your reactions. When you realize that, you stop fighting to be heard, and you start speaking when it truly matters. A grounded person doesn't rush to speak. They wait for the right moment. They don't need to dominate because they know their voice carries weight when they choose to use it. Silence, when intentional, can be more powerful than noise. Sometimes, the best way to handle a person who talks too much is to let their words hang in the air. Then calmly bring the focus back with one thoughtful sentence. You don't need to shout to command attention. You just need to be present. Another key part of staying grounded is regulating your body language and tone. Your nonverbal cues speak louder than your words. If you lean forward, cross your arms, or raise your voice, you're signaling tension, and they'll match it. But if you relax your posture, keep your tone even, and maintain steady eye contact, you send a silent message: I'm not competing with you. This quiet confidence is magnetic. It changes how people perceive you. They start to respect your calm because it stands in contrast to the chaos around them. But one of the best examples of this is in leadership or workplace discussions. Imagine a meeting where one person dominates every topic, cutting others off mid-sentence. Many people in that room will try to jump in or talk louder to get a word in. But the person who stays quiet observes and then calmly says, "I'd like to share my perspective when you're done," immediately shifts the power dynamic. Why? Because grounded communication commands attention without demanding it. It's confidence without arrogance. To stay grounded, you must also detach from the need for validation. Many people get caught in arguments with dominant personalities because they want to win. They want to prove they're right, smarter, or more informed. But the goal of communication isn't to win, it's to connect. When you stop seeking validation from people who overtalk, you free yourself from their control. You no longer measure your value by how much space you take up in a conversation. You start to value quality over quantity. Grounded communication is also about emotional neutrality. You don't mirror their energy. You don't get louder when they do. Instead, you hold your tone, your expression, and your focus. You stay emotionally consistent, no matter how unpredictable they become. This not only protects your peace, but also teaches others how to engage with you. Over time, they learn that if they want your attention, they must meet your calm energy, not your chaos. And if none of these strategies seem to work, remember, silence can be your strongest response. When you stop reacting, they start to notice the imbalance. You're no longer feeding their need to dominate. Eventually, they either adjust their tone or reveal their true insecurity. Either way, you remain in control. Being grounded isn't about being passive. It's about being powerful without being reactive. It's knowing that your voice carries more strength when it's used with intention, not emotion. When you stay calm while others lose control, you stand out, not because you shouted the loudest, but because you never lost your center. So the next time someone tries to take over a conversation, take a deep breath. Don't rush to speak. Don't try to compete. Let them finish and then speak with clarity and calm authority. Your stillness will speak louder than their words ever could, because true confidence isn't loud. It's steady, and steady people don't chase attention, they attract it. When words fail to make an impact in a conversation dominated by someone else, your body language becomes your greatest ally. The way you hold yourself, make eye contact, and control your physical presence communicates volumes, often louder than words ever could. Confident body language is not about aggression or intimidation. It's about alignment between your inner strength and your outer expression. It silently declares, "I deserve to be heard," without you ever needing to raise your voice. People who dominate conversations often thrive on taking up both verbal and physical space. They lean in, gesture widely, interrupt often, and command attention through sheer energy. If you shrink back, cross your arms, lower your eyes, or pull away, you unconsciously signal submission. They take it as permission to continue controlling the interaction. The key, therefore, isn't to fight back with equal force, but to reclaim your space, mentally and physically, with confidence, composure, and subtle authority. Start with posture. The way you sit or stand sends an instant message about how much you value your presence. Straighten your back, keep your shoulders relaxed but open, and face the person directly. This posture projects self-assurance and self-respect. It tells the other person that you're engaged and not easily dismissed. You don't have to tower over anyone or make exaggerated gestures. Stillness can be even more powerful. A person who holds their ground calmly exudes silent authority. Next, focus on eye contact. This is one of the most potent tools you have to reclaim control. When someone interrupts you or dominates a conversation, look them directly in the eyes, not with anger or confrontation, but with calm steadiness. Maintain your gaze just long enough to signal, "I'm not backing down." Eye contact conveys presence. It tells the other person you're aware, confident, and grounded in your truth. People who dominate conversations often rely on others looking away. They use that as a cue to keep going. But when you meet their eyes, you break that cycle. You subtly remind them that this is a shared space, not a stage. Then comes voice and tone. Confidence isn't about being the loudest person in the room. It's about speaking with clarity, control, and intention. Lowering your tone slightly and slowing your pace communicates more authority than raising your volume. When you speak too fast or too loud, it signals anxiety. When you speak slowly and clearly, it commands respect. Even short, assertive statements like, "Hold on, I wasn't finished," delivered with a calm, steady tone, can reset the dynamic instantly. You don't need to match their energy. You need to own yours. One of the most effective yet often overlooked techniques is controlled movement. People who dominate conversations often move frantically, leaning forward, gesturing aggressively, or pacing as they speak. In contrast, your stillness can be magnetic. When you move with purpose, such as slightly leaning forward to emphasize a point or gently raising your hand to pause an interruption, your gestures carry more weight. Movement should always be intentional, not reactive. Remember, control of movement reflects control of mind. Facial expression also plays a vital role. A calm, composed expression sends the message that you're neither intimidated nor impressed by dominance. If you frown or show frustration, they'll sense emotional vulnerability and push harder. If you smile excessively, they might interpret it as approval or submission. The goal is neutrality, a subtle, composed expression that shows you're listening, but not conceding. Another important part of confident body language is using space consciously. Don't physically shrink to make others comfortable. Whether sitting in a meeting or standing in a group, position yourself openly. Avoid crossing your arms or legs tightly. These are closed signals. Keep your stance balanced and your gestures open. People who dominate conversations tend to own the space with their presence. When you mirror that ownership, calmly and respectfully, the energy equalizes. The phrase, "reclaim your space," isn't just metaphorical, it's literal. You deserve to occupy physical, emotional, and conversational space equally. When you sit or stand as though you belong, others subconsciously begin to treat you as though you do. This is especially important in professional or social settings where you might feel overshadowed. The person who looks composed, comfortable, and unbothered is often perceived as the most powerful one in the room. It's also worth noting that confident body language begins internally. You can't fake it for long if you don't believe in your own value. Before walking into any conversation or meeting, take a moment to ground yourself. Breathe deeply. Remind yourself, my voice matters. My thoughts are valuable. That inner conviction naturally translates into your outer posture. Confidence is felt before it's seen. In essence, confident body language is about congruence, your body reflecting your inner certainty. When you align your energy, posture, and presence, you no longer need to demand respect. It comes naturally. People start listening, not because you force them to, but because your calm authority makes them want to. So the next time someone dominates a conversation, remember, you don't have to outtalk them. Just sit tall. Look them in the eyes. Speak with quiet clarity. Let your presence do what words cannot, because true confidence doesn't compete. It simply is. And when you embody that, no one can take your space again. In every conversation, there are two kinds of people: those who talk to be heard, and those who listen to understand. When you're dealing with someone who dominates every discussion, it's easy to think your only choices are silence or confrontation. But there's a third, far more powerful option, guiding the conversation through active listening. This approach allows you to redirect the flow of communication without conflict, regain balance without aggression, and influence the interaction without ever raising your voice. Active listening is not passive. It's a strategic skill that combines empathy with control. When you listen actively, you're not simply waiting for your turn to talk. You're paying close attention, understanding their perspective, and then skillfully steering the dialogue toward mutual exchange. Dominant talkers thrive on control, but when you use listening as a tool, you take back that control in a subtle and intelligent way. The first step is understanding what active listening really means. It's about being fully present in the moment, focusing on what the person is saying, their tone, their body language, and even what they're not saying. You're reading between the lines. Instead of reacting emotionally to their dominance, you observe it calmly. You notice patterns. When they interrupt, what topics they steer toward, and how they seek validation. This awareness gives you insight into their communication style, which you can then use to navigate the interaction more effectively. For example, imagine you're in a meeting and someone keeps interrupting or dominating the discussion. Instead of trying to talk over them, let them finish and then calmly say, "That's an interesting point, and it actually connects to something I wanted to share." This small phrase acknowledges them, but also reclaims space for your voice. You're validating their input without surrendering your own. It's assertive, not aggressive. Active listening works because it disarms defensiveness. When dominant personalities feel ignored, they push harder, but when they feel heard, they naturally relax their grip on the conversation. By summarizing their point, "So what I hear you saying is," you make them feel acknowledged. Then, when you follow it up with your own perspective, "I'd like to add something to that," you guide the conversation into a more balanced exchange. You haven't silenced them, you've simply restructured the dynamic. This method is especially powerful in personal relationships. Maybe you have a friend, partner, or family member who always dominates conversations. If you respond by arguing or matching their intensity, it often escalates. But if you listen intentionally and respond with calm clarity, the tone shifts. For instance, you might say, "I get what you're saying, and I see why you feel that way. Can I share how I see it?" You've now invited a two-way dialogue. Your listening creates space for your voice to be heard. Another powerful aspect of guiding through listening is timing. Dominant people tend to fill every silence because they fear losing control. Use pauses to your advantage. When they finish speaking, wait a moment before you respond. That brief silence subtly signals that you're the one deciding when the next part of the conversation begins. Silence can be a form of power. It unsettles those who are used to dominating through constant words. It also gives you time to choose your response wisely instead of reacting emotionally. Active listening also involves redirecting the focus of the conversation. If the person keeps talking about themselves, ask thoughtful, open-ended questions that shift the dialogue toward broader topics or shared perspectives. For example, "That's interesting. How do you think that affects the rest of the team?" Or, "I can see how that worked for you. Do you think it would work the same for others?" These questions gently guide them out of self-centered speech and into more inclusive discussion. A key part of this technique is confidence. You must believe that your perspective is equally valuable. Active listening doesn't mean giving away your voice. It means earning the right moment to use it effectively. When you show genuine attention, people become more receptive to your input. They start to associate your presence with calm authority, the kind that listens first and speaks with impact. It's also worth remembering that guiding the conversation through listening is not about manipulation. It's about mutual respect. You're showing the other person that communication works best when it's balanced. You're modeling what healthy dialogue looks like Even if they haven't learned that skill yet, over time, your consistency can subtly retrain how they communicate with you. In the end, the most powerful communicators aren't those who dominate the room, they're the ones who can lead it gently, intelligently, and confidently. By practicing active listening, you transform every conversation from a power struggle into a partnership. You teach others that your presence doesn't need to compete for attention. It earns it through understanding, patience, and precision. So the next time someone tries to take over the conversation, don't fight for control, guide it. Listen deeply, acknowledge strategically, and speak intentionally. Because the quietest person in the room isn't the weakest. They're often the one directing the entire conversation without anyone even realizing it. When dealing with people who dominate conversations, one of the most powerful skills you can develop is the ability to set clear verbal boundaries. Boundaries are not walls, they are doors, doors that define how others can enter and engage with your space. They don't shut people out, but they make it clear that respect is required to come in. When someone constantly interrupts, talks over you, or controls every conversation, it's your responsibility not to fight back, but to calmly and confidently draw the line. Boundaries teach people how to treat you, and verbal boundaries teach them how to communicate with you. Setting verbal boundaries starts with understanding your right to be heard. Too often, people tolerate dominating behavior because they fear being seen as rude or confrontational. But protecting your voice is not impolite, it's self-respect. Conversations are meant to be a two-way exchange, and when one person consistently takes over, the balance of respect is lost. Reclaiming that balance begins with one simple but powerful truth: but you have the right to speak, to finish your thoughts, and to be listened to. The first step in setting boundaries is using direct yet respectful language. You don't need to raise your voice or sound angry. In fact, the calmer you are, the more authority your words carry. Statements like, "I'd like to finish my thought," or "Can I share my perspective too?" are simple but effective. They are assertive, not aggressive. You're not asking for permission, you're asserting your space in the conversation. Over time, people learn that you won't allow your voice to be overshadowed. One of the most underestimated forms of communication is tone. Your tone determines whether your boundary is respected or resisted. A calm, steady tone communicates confidence. A defensive tone invites pushback. When someone interrupts, instead of saying, "Can you please stop cutting me off?" which can sound irritated, say, "Hold on, I'm not finished yet." The second approach is clear, controlled, and firm. It doesn't attack the person, it addresses the behavior. The goal is not to create tension, but to establish clarity. Sometimes, especially in group settings or workplaces, you can set boundaries indirectly through structured communication. For example, in a meeting where one person dominates every discussion, you might say, "Let's make sure everyone gets a turn to share their thoughts." This not only asserts your own right to speak, but also creates space for others. It subtly shifts the social expectation that everyone's voice deserves time without directly confronting the dominating person. In personal relationships, setting verbal boundaries can be more emotionally complex. When a friend, partner, or family member constantly dominates conversations, it can make you feel unheard and emotionally drained. In these situations, clarity and compassion go hand in hand. You might say, "I value our conversations, but sometimes I feel like I don't get a chance to express myself fully. Can we make sure it's a two-way exchange?" Notice that this approach doesn't attack, it invites awareness. It reminds the other person that communication is a shared experience, not a solo performance. It's also essential to follow through once you've set a boundary. People test boundaries, not always intentionally, but out of habit. If someone continues to interrupt after you've asked them not to, pause the conversation. Say, "I'll finish once you're done," or "I'd like to continue when I can speak without interruption." Consistency reinforces your message. Every time you calmly uphold your boundaries, you train others to communicate with you respectfully. Another powerful aspect of boundary setting is nonverbal reinforcement. Words are stronger when your body language supports them. Maintain eye contact, keep an upright posture, and speak from a grounded, steady place. Your physical presence should reflect your verbal message: calm, clear, and confident. If your words say, "I deserve respect," but your body says, "I'm unsure," people will sense that and push limits. But boundaries are not just spoken, they're embodied. It's also important to realize that setting boundaries isn't about controlling others. It's about controlling yourself. You can't make someone listen. You can't force them to respect you. But you can control how you engage, how you speak, and how long you choose to stay in conversations that don't honor mutual respect. Sometimes the most powerful boundary is simply disengagement. If someone repeatedly ignores your voice despite your efforts, it's okay to step away. Silence can be a statement too. A statement that says, "I won't participate in disrespect." And here's a deeper truth: boundaries are a reflection of self-worth. The clearer your boundaries, the more you value your peace. People who lack boundaries often end up drained, resentful, and unheard, not because others are cruel, but because they never taught others where the line is. The moment you begin asserting those lines, everything changes. People start to adjust, and those who can't adjust often drift away. And that's not loss, that's alignment. Setting verbal boundaries takes courage, but it pays lifelong rewards. You gain confidence, clarity, and peace. You stop feeling powerless in conversations because you realize that being heard isn't about being loud. It's about being firm. When you speak with calm authority, people listen. And if they don't, your boundary gives you the freedom to walk away without guilt. So, the next time someone dominates the conversation, remember, your voice matters. You don't need to out-talk them, you just need to outgrow the fear of asserting yourself. Boundaries are not barriers. They are bridges to healthier, more balanced communication. And once you master the art of setting them, no one can take your peace or your voice again. There comes a point in every interaction with a dominating person when you must ask yourself, is this conversation adding to my peace or taking from it? Because no matter how skilled you become at staying calm, using confident body language, or setting verbal boundaries, some people will continue to talk over you, disregard your presence, and drain your emotional energy. That's when the most powerful response is not to fight harder, but to protect your energy and choose peace. Protecting your energy doesn't mean avoiding people altogether or shutting down emotionally. It means becoming selective about where you invest your mental and emotional resources. Every conversation, every interaction is an exchange of energy. You give attention, empathy, and presence, and ideally you receive the same in return. But when you're constantly around people who dominate discussions, interrupt you, or make you feel invisible, that exchange becomes one-sided. You end up feeling mentally exhausted, emotionally heavy, and spiritually depleted. Choosing peace means realizing you have the right to stop pouring energy into places that never refill you. The first step in protecting your energy is recognition. Notice how you feel after certain conversations. Do you walk away feeling inspired and seen, or tense and unheard? Your emotions are signals. They tell you when your boundaries are being crossed. If you consistently feel drained after interacting with a particular person, it's a sign that they're taking more than they're giving. Awareness is the foundation of protection. Once you identify who or what is depleting you, You can begin to take conscious steps to guard your inner peace. Next comes detachment, not from people, but from their behavior. When you detach emotionally, you stop taking things personally. Dominating personalities often thrive on reaction. They gain power when you show frustration or defensiveness. But when you stop reacting and simply observe, you take away their control. You can acknowledge their behavior without absorbing it. You can listen without agreeing, engage without surrendering your calm. Detachment doesn't mean coldness. It means emotional maturity. It's the understanding that their need to control or overtalk comes from them, not you. One powerful practice to maintain this detachment is the mental reminder, not my energy to carry. When someone tries to dominate a conversation, talk endlessly about themselves, or dismiss your opinions, silently repeat this phrase. It helps you stay centered and reminds you that you're not responsible for their need for control. You can still be polite, still be kind, but you don't have to absorb their chaos. Protecting your energy also involves limiting access. You can't always control who you interact with, especially in workplaces or families. But you can control the frequency, duration, and depth of those interactions. If a colleague constantly hijacks discussions, keep your responses short and professional. If a friend dominates every conversation with negativity or self-focus, reduce how often you engage. If a family member drains you with constant criticism or control, establish time limits or physical distance when possible. You're not being rude, you're honoring your well-being. There's a misconception that choosing peace means avoiding confrontation. But that's not true. Peace is not the absence of conflict, it's the presence of self-control. Sometimes protecting your peace means saying, "I'm not going to discuss this right now," or "Let's continue this another time." It's about refusing to participate in conversations that lead nowhere productive. The moment you realize you don't owe anyone unlimited access to your mind, your mood, or your time, you begin to reclaim your freedom. Another key part of choosing peace is self-reflection. Ask yourself why certain people's behavior affects you more deeply than others. Sometimes, the reason dominating personalities frustrate us so much is because they trigger old wounds. Times we felt ignored, overlooked, or silenced. Healing those inner emotions helps you respond from strength rather than sensitivity. When your self-worth is secure, but no one's loudness can make you feel small, also make it a habit to recharge intentionally. After dealing with emotionally demanding people, give yourself time to reset. That might mean a walk outside, a few minutes of deep breathing, journaling, listening to calming music, or spending time with people who uplift you. Protecting your energy isn't just about avoiding the draining. It's about refilling the positive. You can't show up strong in any area of life if you're running on empty. Finally, understand this truth: peace is a choice you make daily. It's not something others give you, it's something you decide to keep, no matter how others behave. You may not be able to change people who dominate conversations, but you can change how much power you give them. You can respond with calm instead of anger, distance instead of drama, and silence instead of struggle. That's not weakness, that's mastery. So the next time you find yourself with someone who won't stop talking, who dismisses your words, or tries to control the dialogue, pause and breathe. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to win the conversation. Just ask yourself one question: is this worth my energy? If the answer is no, let peace be your response. Walk away gracefully, refocus on yourself, and remember, protecting your peace is not selfish, it's self-respect. Because at the end of the day, your energy is your most valuable currency. Spend it where it grows, not where it drains. Speak where you're heard, not where you're silenced. And always remember, peace is not found by controlling others, but by mastering yourself.